Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural webinar for Hart Leadership Group, our leadership series. As I started thinking about who would be a great person to talk with and really kick off this series for Hart Leadership Group, a dear friend of mine came to mind, Garry Ridge. When I met Garry, probably 10, 12 years ago, he was at that time the active CEO of WD-40, headquartered down in San Diego, California. He is since now the chairman emeritus, former CEO. I think he's busier, like I hear from most retired executives, probably busier now than he was when he was running WD-40. And that's from a lot of conversations I've had with Garry. He's been kind enough to speak back when I ran the Center for Family Business at Cal State Fullerton. Garry came up to Fullerton a couple of times and spoke to us. Once after a book that he had co-written with a good friend of ours, Dr. Ken Blanchard, who may be joining us today. And at another time when he came up and spoke to us as well. One thing that's been really true and has resonated with me each time I've spoken with Garry, heard him speak, or just had one-on-one conversations or a previous podcast that he and I did about 5 years ago, is that he really gets what it means to create a great culture. My hope today is that for each of you who are logged in today, and for those who watch this after today, you'll pick up at least one nugget that you can take back to your organization. I know we have some nonprofit leaders on here today. We have some CEOs. We have some folks that work in organizations, family businesses, and otherwise. And my hope for today is that something that you hear today will resonate with you so deeply and profoundly that you'll be able to take it back and begin to make some changes in your organization that not only will you feel good about, but that your people, your tribe, as Garry will talk about here momentarily, your customers, your employees, the people around you, your family, they'll see that change as well and start to feel that. So with that, welcome to all of you who are attending. I do have copies, before I introduce Garry and we jump into this, there are copies of this book, Garry's book, which we're going to really put up. This whole conversation today is going to come from his new book, Any Dumbass Can Do It. Love the title. If you log on to Hart Leadership, that's H-A-R-T, hartleadership.com, at the very, very top of my website, I put a little link that says, I am a dumbass, I need this book. If you click on that, it'll launch an email to me and I'll send you a copy of the book today. You just have to enter your mailing address and we'll get a copy of that book out to you, courtesy of Garry. So Garry Ridge, as I mentioned, former chairman of WD-40, has written several books. The most recent, as I just alluded to, Any Dumbass Can Do It. I love the title, Garry. So before we jump into the book and why that title, first of all, just welcome and happy to have you. Anything you'd like to say as we get kicked off here this morning?
Well, g'day, Ed. As usual, it's great to be with you. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for what you do to help spread the word that, as leaders, it's really our responsibility to build organizations where people go to work every day, they make a contribution to something bigger than themselves, they learn something new, they're protected and they're set free by a compelling set of values and they go home happy. And why that's important is happy people build happy families and happy families build happy communities. And with a bit of luck, happy communities build a happy world. And I don't think anybody would argue with me that today a little happier world would be a good thing. So those that are on with us today have the opportunity to make the world a little happier through the cultures that they build in organizations.
I love that, Garry. That's a fantastic way to kick off. So let me just ask you a quick question. What makes you happy?
Well, really, I think if you're in an organization, what makes you happy is being treated like and knowing that you belong, being treated like and knowing that you matter, and being able to make choices. So, in organizations, belonging and knowing you matter are two of the biggest drivers of motivation. And, Maslow, in his hierarchy to self-actualization, kind of worked it out many years ago. The first two rungs of that model are, am I safe and do I have resources? But the third one is love or belonging. And unfortunately, a lot of people, a lot of leaders, actually move away from this word love. They're afraid of it. But our job is to love the people that we have the privilege to lead.
I love that. You talk about that word belonging, and it takes me back to a word that you like to use a lot. I played high school baseball, and our team mascot was the Indians, and across our chest, it might not be appropriate today given our political environment, but our team name was the Tribe. And we loved that. We loved that the 15 of us on this baseball team belonged to a team called the Tribe. That was the name across our chest. You talk about that word tribe a lot in previous books. And just when I interviewed you 5 years ago on the From the Heart podcast and many conversations, talk about how belonging and the word tribe kind of run hand in hand.
Yeah, and let's first deal with this perception that tribe only belongs to indigenous groups.
Right.
That's not true. Tribes go back to the beginning of mankind. We are tribal in our nature. Ugg the caveman, way back with that big wooden, mallet that he had, was a tribe member. And whether you call yourselves a tribe or a clan, it's a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. So, I had some feedback and some pushback about using the word tribe, but I wanted to be clear about it. It's not about any indigenous group. It's a great deal of respect for indigenous people. It's a matter of we are tribal in nature. That's what human beings are. So again, the whole purpose of tribal is to belong. And again, a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other is really what the essence of the tribe is.
Yeah. Our mutual friend Dave Logan up at USC wrote that book, Tribal Leadership, several years ago.
Absolutely.
On that a lot. Absolutely. All right, so let's cut right to the chase. You got a book over your shoulder. I have the same book over my shoulder. Again, for those that are joining us, if you'd like your free copy of the book, Any Dumbass Can Do It, visit heartleadership.com. At the very top of my page, it says, I am a dumbass. I'm going to just chime right into that. Click on that. It'll launch an email to me, and today we'll drop a copy of the book to you, courtesy of Gary. He was kind enough to supply us with several copies. So let's talk about the book. So first of all, let's just jump right into why that title.
Yeah, I want to get people's attention.
Yeah, you did.
But really, what it is, I call myself now the Dean of Dumbassery, and I believe that dumbassery is a superpower. And what it really means is that as leaders, we will not bring out the best of people if we think that we are the smartest person in the room. So our job as leaders, and as we learned from our dear friend and the guru of servant leadership, Dr. Ken Blanchard, is that our job is to bring out the best of others. So, yeah, I picked it, and I'm an Aussie, so, in Australia, dumbass is sometimes a term of endearment. Hey, you dumbass.
Nice.
So again, I could have called it any dumb donkey could do it, right? But it didn't sound as good. So I wanted to get people's attention, and I also wanted to make the point that a lot of leaders feel that building great cultures in organizations is overwhelming. It's not overwhelming. If you know the ingredients that need to be in place to build a great culture, and you are prepared to execute on those ingredients on a consistent basis, then you will, over time, build a great culture. Now, a lot of leaders also feel that culture is kind of something like, sprinkling fairy dust on an organization, which isn't true. I have a dear friend, his name is Charlie Maloof. He owns a chain of, he's a family business, owns a chain of Ashley furniture stores out in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he has a great statement. He says, culture is not a microwavable event. It takes a crock pot approach. And that is so right. So do you know the ingredients that you need to have to build a great culture? And then as the leader, are you prepared to take care of those ingredients over time?
I love that. That was going to be one of my last questions today, but since you went there, I'm going to just move that to the top of the list here. So many people think that changing a culture starts at the very top, that an organization, certainly an organizational culture, has to start at the top. But how can, I'm looking at the names of the people that are on this webinar right now, and I see some mid-level managers, I see some CEOs, I see some people that are sprinkled around within the authority within their organization. Talk to someone who might be in the middle of the company somewhere. What impact can they have, and how can they crockpot, if you will, that culture change, whether it's within their little team or organizationally?
Start cooking the crockpot at your own table. You can build a culture or a subculture that's very, very enviable within your own organization. And in fact, Ed, I've seen that happen. As you know, I taught at USD for 16 years. I taught a class in the master's program on leadership around culture. And, a number of times we've had that question put to us. And I'd say, start it in your own leadership group. Are you, as the leader, actually exercising, what you need to exercise as to build the culture within your organization? And in a number of circumstances, I got feedback that people said, hey, what's different in Ed's department? Why are the people going, that go to work in Ed's area feeling more engaged than others? And funnily enough, why is Ed's department more productive than anyone else? So whether you're at the top of the organization or you're leading a small team, start that right there. Start at your table. Start cooking at your table.
Yeah. So don't wait for the culture to change. Be that change is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Lead through.
Awesome. In your book, I've read through the entire book, I've read it and I've taken a lot of notes, and I've gone back and reread in preparation for today. Some of the chapters that really jump out at me, and I apologize for having to put the specs on, but you talk about the 4 pillars of a friction-free culture. We're gonna live in this culture conversation for a while. So talk about those 4 pillars and what you term friction-free culture.
Yeah, so the 4 pillars are care. So we love and care about our people enough, not only to reward them and applaud them for doing great work, but we're brave enough to redirect them when they're not playing for an A. Now, you mentioned it earlier, the book that I wrote with Ken, which was called Helping People Win at Work. The tie line is, don't mark my paper, help me get an A. So the care starts with, are we clear about what an A looks like? Have you and I really got a clear understanding of what does that A look like? But then you have to be brave enough to redirect people when they're not playing for that A. That's a great coach's job is, if you've got a team, if you're coaching a team, and you've coached many baseball teams, I'm sure, and you've got a player that's not swinging the bat the way that is going to get them to hit a home run, you're not being a great coach if you're not sharing with them your experiences of how to play a better game. Another friend of mine, his name is Ron Carusi. He wrote a great book called To Be Honest. He said, he has a great statement. He said, don't protect your own comfort zone at the expense of someone else's growth. And that's really around the care thing. So, if you were a great coach and you were protecting your own comfort zone by not sharing how that player should swing the bat, then you would not be helping. So care is so important. Candor is no lying, no faking, no hiding. I believe in organizations, most people don't lie. I believe they fake and they hide. And the reason they fake and hide is because of fear. So how do you reduce the level of fear in an organization? Now, we did that by taking the word failure out and replacing it with learning moments. So, we said you don't make mistakes, you have learning moments. And a learning moment is sharing a positive or negative outcome of any situation so that people can benefit from the learning. And if you think about it, every innovation is the outcome of prior learning. In fact, if you were to go back to WD-40, a lot of people probably don't know the story, but back in 1953, WD-40 was a fledgling company down in San Diego called Rocket Chemical Company. And Rocket Chemical Company was in the business of developing chemicals in the anti-corrosive area and lubrication area for the aviation industry. And at that time, there was a challenge to fix a problem with condensation and corrosion in the umbilical cord of the Atlas space rocket. So the chemists got together and started to mix up, formulas to solve that problem. Well, Formula 1 didn't work, and 2 didn't work, and 15 didn't work, and 29 didn't work, and 35 didn't work, nor did 37, 38, or 39. But guess what? Formula 40 worked. So that's why it's called WD, water displacement 40th formula. So, WD-40 was born on learning moments, if you will. The next one is accountability. Are we clear? What do you expect from me? What do I expect from you? What does an A look like? Most people let people down because they aren't clear around expectations. And then finally, responsibility. Responsibility equals accountability and ownership. And we put something together at WD-40 Company that was what I call the antidote to a very, very prevalent disease that's in organizations. It's called the na disease. It's the finger pointing disease.
Right.
So we put together a statement that we actually called the Maniac Pledge, which was our statement of permission. And the Maniac Pledge says, I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I'm responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I am responsible for telling them. And that was the permission statement around the fourth pillar, which was responsibility.
When did you start at WD-40?
I started in 1987.
When did you retire?
I didn't retire. I refired.
Refired. Okay, that's right. I shoot myself for that because that's the term I've heard you say before.
I refired in 2021, I think it was. No, wait a minute. Where are we? This is 25. 2022, I don't know. 3 years ago.
You're still working. Yeah, that's why you can't even answer that question. The reason I asked that question, so many decades of leading the company, obviously WD solution number 40 worked. You talk about the learning moment. In fact, if you want to learn more about Gary too, he has a daily email that goes out. If you go to thelearningmoment.net, you can register for that. And it's a free, if you've followed me on LinkedIn, you've seen me post many times some of the quotes that I get from Gary, which drives a lot of my motivation every morning when I read that. It really sets me in a right direction each day. So thank you, Gary, for that. And I encourage all of you to do that as well. If you think back over your multi-years, not only with the company, but then becoming the CEO, chairman of the company, are there a handful of learning moments that you look back on in your career that shifted you from maybe heading in a direction that possibly you weren't proud of, or that you shouldn't have gone, more into the direction that you are proud of and should have gone?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think the real catalyst of that was when I met Ken Blanchard.
Yeah, me too.
I joined the company in 1987 in Sydney, Australia. I started in Sydney. I opened the Australian subsidiary for the company, and I moved to the US in 1994. They asked me to move over here and head up our international expansion program. I didn't come here to be CEO, but about 3 years later, the CEO retired. And for some reason, the board of directors of a US public company thought this, dumbass from Australia might be okay. So I knew, with the help of my friends at the company, how we could make the brand famous around the world. It was just going to take, you buy market share with time and money. So we needed to take time and we needed some money, and we had that. What was on my mind, Ed, was how do you build a culture that, now that the sun was never, ever going to set on the can, that really allowed people to operate and be free around the world? And I didn't know how to do. And it was on my mind. And I talk about this in the book. I was traveling on a Qantas 747 from Los Angeles down to Sydney. And as you do when you travel, you take a bunch of stuff to read. And right. I had some stuff that I was reading, and I read a quote from the Dalai Lama that said, our purpose in life is to make people happy. If you can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And I thought, wow, what a great mantra for an organization. Then I read a second quote from Aristotle, which said, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And I thought, well, Aristotle was born in 384 BC, and that's a pretty profound statement. I think if people really enjoy what they're doing, they're going to do it better. I still didn't know how to do it. I got back to San Diego and I read an article in the local paper, and it talked about a master's degree in leadership at the University of San Diego that was developed by Dr. Ken Blanchard, the guru of servant leadership, and the business school there. And I thought, that's interesting. I'm going to go and learn about that. So I went to an information session. That was my first interaction with Ken. And Ken got up and he said, most MBA programs get people in the head. We're going to start getting people, and you'll like this, in the heart.
Look at that. Right.
And I thought, wow. So I'm now CEO of a US public company, and I went back to school. and I did a master's degree in leadership for 2 years. And that was the start of my learning moments, because over those next 2 years, I learned the principles of leadership around being a servant leader, the principles around leading teams, all of the stuff that you need to know to build a great organization. And because I was CEO, I got to put them into practice. So the things that worked, we did more of, and the things that didn't work, we did less of. And the rest is history. So my biggest learning moment was having the courage to learn.
Excellent. If anybody has any questions, throw it a Q&A or throw it in the chat. We'll try to get to it while we can here. Now, leading from the head is important. Obviously, you need the analytical, you need the science person, you need the person who can think through logically. But obviously, as you mentioned, I do love when you say leading from the heart, for, the pun intended, of course, with my last name, but it really is how I try to drive what I do as well. How do you help someone not move away from the head, but how do you help them tap into and move more into the heart when it comes to how they treat their people and how they lead and how they run their organization? It's a tough thing to do for some people.
Yeah, it is. And I think the first step, and it was actually the first class that we did in the master's program that I did, and it was a week-long class, and it was really understanding who you are, because leadership is about influence, not about command and control. And, in my coaching practice now, I coach CEOs. My purpose statement now is I help leaders build cultures of belonging where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happy, more connected world. That's my purpose statement since I refired. And I think the first part of my coaching that I do with my CEOs, and I currently coach 7 CEOs, is awareness. Are you aware of your leadership behavior? And a lot of leaders are not aware of the behavior that is causing bad leadership in their organization. I invented someone I write about in the book. This is Alec. Yeah. Alec is the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Inc. Now, or it could be Alice. I mean, I don't want to be gender.
There you go. That's right.
But if you think about Alec has some behaviors, and Alec's behaviors are his ego eats his empathy instead of his empathy eating his ego. Alec is a micromanager. They think they're corporate royalty. They want a fear-based culture. They're a master of control. They're a know-it-all. They have all the answers, even the wrong ones. They don't value learning. They must always be right. They hate feedback, and they do not necessarily keep their commitments. And these are the sort of behaviors that a lot of leaders have, and they go, wow, why aren't I building a great organization? Versus if you're a servant leaders involve and love their people. They're always in servant leadership mode. They're expected to be competent, so they're continual learners. They're connected with emotional intelligence. They spend a lot of time in the stinky locker room with their people. They have a heart of gold, but they have a backbone of steel as well. They're champions of hope. They know micromanagement is not scalable. They do what they say they're going to do, and they treasure the gift of feedback. So again, your question was, how do people know, or what do they do? Well, you need to be aware. So the first step is, are you aware? And then secondly, once you become aware of the behaviors that you don't want to exhibit anymore, are you going to be intentional about changing those? So that's the difference.
I appreciate that. Yesterday, you and I had an honor to chat with you a little bit as we did last preparations for today. And you talk about it in the book as well. Talk a little bit about the difference between a coach and a manager.
Oh, yeah. So, again, words matter in an organization, as you know, Ed. But, let's just play a little game here. It's your first day at your new job. Good morning, Ed. I'm Gary. I'm your manager.
By the way, I feel really small. Yeah.
You manage your bank account. You manage inventory. You don't manage people. In fact, one of the definitions of manager as a word is manipulator. But if I say to you, good morning, Ed, welcome to the company. I'm Gary. I'm your coach. I'm here only for one reason, and that's to help you play your best game. So if you think about the attributes of a great coach is committed to helping the player win, full stop. A great coach understands the game and knows what it takes to win, is brave. They don't protect their own comfort zone at the expense of someone else's growth. As Ken would say, they're okay at redirection. They don't run onto the field and take the ball. I've never seen a great coach in the middle of a great soccer, rugby, or football game run onto the field and take the ball away from the player. However, ALEC-type leaders are micromanagers. They want to go in and take that ball. So don't run onto the field and take the ball. They spend a lot of time on the sideline observing the play. They add value to the player with feedback on how to improve the play. They never, ever, ever, ever go to the podium and take the prize. And unfortunately, ALEC-type leaders, they want to take the praise. If something goes wrong, it's not their fault. If something goes right, there. And they spend a lot of time in the stinky locker room. What does that mean? It means they're going to be with the people, understanding, listening to them, asking simple questions like, are you okay? What's on your mind? So be a great coach, not a stinky manager.
Yeah, it reminds me years ago, I used to coach each of my 4 kids played soccer. And I know very little about soccer other than what I learned from being an AYSO coach. But there was one week in particular, and it might have been many times, but I'm recalling one week where the league out in Chino Hills, where we lived at the time, told all the coaches it's going to be completely silent on the sideline. And we even encouraged the parents not to yell. All the kids came back and told us that was their favorite week of the year. They didn't have 1,000 voices yelling at them what to do. They didn't have 3 coaches yelling, go there, go there, go there, everybody contradicting and conflicting with each other. The coaching was done on Tuesday night at practice. The game was Saturday. I think about that in an organization a lot. Coach your people so well that when they're in the work environment, they know what to do because they've been coached and trained so adequately and so appropriately. It sounds like that's a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah, and observe the play for sure, because,
right.
At the next coaching session, you want to do an after-action review and say, hey, this is the outcome we had. Were we happy with that? We were very clear on what our A was and what we needed to get. So how are we going to do that?
Yeah. One of my favorite words as a leader that I've read and that I've studied, and you and I have talked about this in the past, and you have a chapter on this, is curiosity. Talk about the curiosity creates more customers, as one of your chapters says.
Yeah, that I think you're referring to my little exercise in Beijing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think curiosity is so important, and I'll tell you the story. This is many, many years ago. I was working on a trade show stand at an automotive parts trade show in Beijing, China. And this is at the early days of taking WD-40 into China. And the Chinese word for lubricant is lunhua, and the Chinese word for sample is yangping. So one of the most effective marketing tools we had was a little tiny free sample of our product. And we'd basically say, here's a sample of our product. This is what it does. Please try it. If you like it, please buy it. So I'm on the stand giving away samples, or trying to, yang ping lunhua, yang ping lunhua, yang ping lunhua. And people are just walking past me and, nothing, paying no attention to me. And I'm thinking, I speak to my Chinese mates there and say, hey, have I got the words right? And is my Chinese that bad? They said, no, you're right. I said, oh, wow. Okay. Now I look out over in the corner of my eye, and I see in the corner a line of people lining up at a I think it was a Toyota motor stand, and they're picking up a brown paper, what I could see was a brown paper bag with a string on it. And I thought, what is in that bag? These people are lining up for that bag, and they don't want my wonderful product, WD-40. What's going on? So now I'm curious.
Yeah.
So I wander over and I have a look in the bag, Ed, and guess what? There's nothing in the bag. Now I'm going, okay, why do people want this bag? The end of the answer is because it was something that was of value to them.
Yeah.
That bag was a bag that was about the right size that they would take to their local store to get, a scoop of rice or whatever it was. So I came back to the stand. I said, well, why don't people want my WD-40? So we do an intercept, and we start asking some people. Well, the reality is they don't need lubricant. They got dirty diesel oil to solve their problem. Why do they need a lubricant? But what we learned was that rust and corrosion was an issue. Now, of course, WD-40 is also a great anti-corrosive. If you spray it, it stops rust from forming. So we changed the delivery. Instead of saying, here's a sample of lubricant, we said, here's a sample of anti-rust oil. Within moments, I swear, we had to have security guards on the stand to stop people from pushing over to get the sample. So if we weren't curious about why people were not interested in our product, we could have walked away from there and gone, this is not a market for us. So be curious. Don't be afraid to ask the question, and, get your shoes dirty and work out why people do or don't want your product.
It's interesting. You triggered a memory, something I read years ago in the old TV show. I guess I can say new too. It's on again. Let's Make a Deal. I heard that when a contestant has a prize that they know what it is, and they have a box or a curtain or a bag where they don't know what it is, 82% of the time, they'll take the uncertain thing just out of their curiosity. They always think that what they don't know might be better than what they do. So I thought about that a lot as well. Yeah, the bag was valuable to them, but they also might have thought, what's inside the bag? So I have a couple of questions have come through, so I'm going to just read these really quickly. A good friend of mine, Jessica Ferrante, says, Gary, what do you think of the trend of flat organizational structures, no middle level management? What have you seen? Sorry, I'm trying to manage these here. What have you seen that works best in a large organization for corporate structure? Kind of two questions, but if you want to attack those.
Well, I think, again, too many layers. How many layers of people do you have to break through to get a decision? And I think you can have an organization, and the most important thing is not the layers, but are there values in place in the organization that protect people and set them free? Now, we had a hierarchical set of values at WD-40, and again, this was my benefit from Ken when we were putting our values together. He was sharing that you need to have a hierarchical set of values so that people can make decisions, not cherry picking the value to whatever the circumstance is. And our values at WD-40 were in place so that anybody at any level in the organization can make any decision, anytime, anywhere in the world without having to quack up the hierarchy and go through these levels of management that you have to go through to get a decision. And here's a beautiful example of how that may work. Our first value at WD-40 was we valued doing the right thing. Our second value at WD-40 was we valued creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. There were three others, and the last one was we value sustaining the WD-40 economy, which was a value that made us aware and made people aware of the fact that we were a public company and we wanted to make sure that we were profitable. So at one day, this is a relatively true story. One day, someone came into the organization and went to see someone in our supply chain and said, we've done some work on one of your formulas. We have an ingredient that we can supply you that if you replace your current ingredient with one that we have, you can save millions of dollars a year. And if Ed, this is going to be your great day. You're going to get promoted today. Once you get up and tell your CEO, as a public company, you've just added, $3 to $4 million to the bottom line. You must be excited about this, Ed. We've done some research on the product. We've, efficacy wise, it's as good as what you have. So, great. Ed said, well, that sounds pretty exciting. Tell me more. And he said, well, I just got to tell you one other thing. He said, and you don't have to worry about this because it's not, something that's uncommon. You just have to put a little warning on your can that says this is a product contains a Prop 65 chemical. And if anybody knows what Prop 65 is, it says that, ingredients in this product in the state of California is known to cause cancer. But don't worry about it, Ed, because your competitors do it. And, most stores you walk into have that, on the front window. And, and Ed said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I can't help you with this." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, we make decisions on our values here. And our first value is we value doing the right thing. Our second value is hierarchically is we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. And cancer does not create positive, lasting memories, so we're not going to do it." But Ed, you don't understand. It's $4 million. You're a public company. You have one of your values says you want to sustain the economy of the company. And it said, "I know, but our values are going to drive our decision." Well, Ed, you better take me to see your CEO because you haven't got this. It's a public company. He'll listen to me, or she'll listen to me. Ed can confidently say, "You can go to anyone you like in this organization, flat, hierarchical, wherever you are going to get exactly the same answer because our decisions here are all based on a hierarchical set of values that we've all agreed and bought into." There's the power of an organization, whether it be flat, middle management, how many people are in it. So the real answer is, do you have in your organization a hierarchical set of clearly defined values that protect people and set them free?
I love that consistency. We don't modify our reaction or our response based on the situation. We stick to the core values. I love that. Julie Hudash, who's a leader of Team Kids, a nonprofit board that I have the privilege of serving on, is with us today. And she has a question in the chat. I'm going to paraphrase. I read through it, and she leads a lot of young people on her team. A lot of people who are recent college graduates or might even still be in college. Are there, I don't want to say techniques, because it sounds like it's a check of the box, and that's not what it is. Are there styles that you've seen as you've led young people who are just getting into their career versus people who might be more seasoned and mature in helping them understand your organizational culture? Hopefully, Julie asked that question the right way.
Ed, whether you're 5, 15, 55, or 95, you as an individual want to know and feel like you belong. You want to know and feel like you matter. You want to know and feel like you can make choices, and you want to be in an organization that is a learning organization. So I don't think it matters only that you create an environment where people know they belong, know they matter, can make choices, and are forever learners. And, even the younger people that are in organizations, have you shown them, or have you demonstrated to them that you really care about them and they belong in the organization? Or is it someone higher up the hierarchy that's getting the attention? And have you really shown them how they are making a meaningful difference in your organization, that what they do actually matters? And they can go home of a night, give someone a high five and say, "What I did today made a difference."
I don't know if anybody else, I get emotional when I see really great leaders do really great things. And I just saw Gary do something really great. And I don't know if anybody else saw this. And if we had more time, I'd ask if you saw it. But an observation I just made as you answered that question is you leaned forward. You looked me in the proverbial eye. I know we're on a camera right now, but you looked right in that dot on your camera, which is to me looking me right in the eye when you answered that question. And it was very apparent to me that whatever you were about to say was really, really important to you because the nonverbal of leaning forward and looking me in the eye. And I think that's such a great technique that you probably weren't even aware you were doing because you do it so naturally. But I'd encourage all of us as we talk to our people, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a child, whether it's a coworker, whether it's someone that works for you, use that technique right there. Pause, lean forward, look them in the eye. They know whatever is about to come out of your mouth means a lot to you and that you mean a lot to them too. So thank you for that. That just cut me to the core when I saw you do that. That was really, really powerful. So appreciate that. All right, a few more questions on here. And again, more questions are coming through. I love the phrase, and I'd love you to expand on this. What if your workplace was a place where people escape to? So many of us escape from work. We look at the clock. We can't wait till 5 p.m. We can't wait till Friday. I've been blessed so often in my career to really, and I've had those Sunday night blues where I dreaded going to work Monday, but for the most part, especially the latter part of my career, I have just been so excited to go to work. Talk about that. Why that title for that chapter on Any Dumbass Can Do It? Creating a workplace where people are excited to go.
Everybody is walking down a path with their and being their own personal hero or hero duties that they have to do. And, one of the things we learned at WD-40, and we actually learned how powerful it was during COVID, was that, there's a lot of stuff going on in people's lives. They've got their personal journeys. And if we can create an environment that they can come into where they feel safe, they feel like they belong, they know they matter, then that's something they can escape to. And I wrote an article during COVID when we were talking about the Great Resignation. I called it the Great Escape. Mm-hmm. What people were doing were actually escaping toxic cultures in organizations.
Right.
And we proved this in an interesting way. In COVID, as we know, started in March 2020. And our whole world was disrupted. We were in a state of total uncertainty. And in January 2021, I said to our leadership team, I want to make sure we're not draining cultural equity in the company. We're doing a lot of things to continue to keep the tribe together, to make sure that, we were connecting. And, we only had 3 objectives from day one. The safety and the well-being of our people was our number 1 objective. Serving our customers as best we could was our second objective. And the third one was to protect the underbody of the company so we could thrive when this was over. And we talked about those 3 things every day. In January 2021, I said to our people, let's go out and do a pulse survey just to make sure we're not draining cultural equity. Now, remember in January 2021, we did have no answer to COVID still. We didn't know whether there was going to be a vaccine that would work. We were so discombobulated. It was terrible. So we went out and we asked the question, and the results came back, and most of the results, in fact, all of them were about where we were in March 2020. So we were relieved that what we were doing was holding us together. But there was one measure that went up. And the statement was, I'm excited about my place in the company's future. And it went to 97% of our people globally said they were, excited. And I said, there's something wrong with the data here.
Right.
Something wrong. Go back and check it. We went back and checked it, and it was right. I said, find out why. And the answer that came back was probably the most validating answer I had about the strength of culture in organization. People said, I feel safe. We are living our tribal promise of a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. If I want to be anywhere now, I want to be here because I feel safe.
Wow. That's insanely amazing that in January of 21, anyone would say those words, I feel safe. That says a lot.
Because they were escaping to an environment that was protecting them. Remember?
Right. Exactly.
That's what we said. We said our number one objective was the safety and the well-being of our people. And we were doing everything we could to keep them safe. As well as, now, interestingly enough, we had the best year in the company's history.
Yeah.
We had the best year in the company's history at that time. Of course, those records have been broken since then, but we benefited from what I call isolation renovation. Everybody was at home or doing stuff, and so they were spraying that can a little more. So that was a benefit. But,
there you go. That's right.
Or riding their bicycles a little more, or something.
A lot more DIYs and bike rides and things like that. I know I was telling you the other day that we had a squeaky door here, and I knew right where to go. The red cap. So, all right, I'm going to dive back to the title of the book again. The Any Dumbass Can Do It. You created a social media page where you are lovingly referred to yourself as the Dean of Dumbassery. Talk about that. Talk about why the dumb. I mean, obviously it's a play on words and it sells copies and it's catchy. And I've seen it on the bookshelf at Borders where the book is there and it pops. And I love that. And anytime, you and I've contributed on a book now lately to Boomer Wisdom. We're hoping that that'll do the same thing. But that talk about what the Dean of Dumbassery means. You refer to yourself as kind of a dumbass. Any little guy who grew up in the backwoods and sticks of Australia can lead a multi-billion-dollar company. Not anybody can, but obviously that's sort of the point of the book. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think is if you're dedicated to bringing the best out of your people, that you have the privilege to lead, and you do it on a consistent basis, and you know that you need to be a forever learner, and you learn along the way, and you recognize that you may have some of Alex's bad habits, and you're willing to get rid of them. Any dumbass can do it. And in fact, like you have, if you go to my website, www.thelearningmoment.net, you can take a quiz, the dumbass quiz. And if you take the dumbass quiz, you'll get your score of where you are on the scale of superpower. And actually, I will send you a PDF of a playbook that you can get some immediate hints on what you can do to start to build a culture in your organization where dumbassery is your superpower.
And I've done that, and Gary does send that PDF. And one thing I've learned is that Gary is very approachable, if you haven't figured that out by now from this conversation. Again, if you want your copy of this book, Any Dumbass Can Do It, log on to heartleadership.com today or anytime. Very, very top of the website. I said it earlier, but for those that are just joining us, it says, I'm a dumbass. I need this book. Click there. It's going to launch you into an email. You just give me your snail mail address, and we'll drop a copy of the book into the mail for you this week. Again, courtesy of Gary. A couple more questions I have, and we're rounding out our time together today, Gary, and I could spend hours with you. Timeless wisdom comes from uncertain times, one of your chapters. And if there's ever a time that's been uncertain, certainly these last 4 or 5 years, I think would fall. I think every generation would say, my dad would say the 1970s were uncertain with the gas crisis and energy crisis, and the 90s with the recession, and the 20s with the dot-com bust. I mean, there's always uncertain times, no matter when we are, where we are. But for those of us living it and breathing it right now, these last 5 years, or the stock market doing what it's doing, or the uncertainty in the political environment, whatever you want to fill in there, talk about that timeless wisdom that comes from these uncertain times.
Yeah, I think that, a friend of mine, Rebecca Homkes, who helped us at strategy at WD-40, and she has a great saying that uncertainty is a series of future events that may or may not occur. And they're always going to be around us. And I think the thing that I learned in uncertain times is don't make serious, jumpy moves. You need to stay the course. You need to be clear about, what is the issue you're dealing with. I think a lot of organizations during COVID made finite decisions in a time of uncertainty. And I think that's very, very dangerous. Like the finite decision is we're always going to be virtual in our workplace from now on. And human beings made decisions around that finite decision. And then, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years later, they come back and say, well, maybe not. Maybe we're not going to do that. And people have, recombobulated their life, if you will. That's one of my favorite words too. I know in the book I talk about that too, the recombobulation zone, because we are generally discombobulated in uncertain times. So again, I think one of the wisdoms of that is, uncertainty is a series of future events that may or may not occur, and most of them don't occur. Yeah. So center yourself.
It's just like worrying. 95% of things we worry about never happen.
We can't help it.
Yeah.
We can't help it.
Page 211 of the epilogue, the very, very second to last sentence in your book, I highlighted this and circled it. And I want to have you address this a little bit. At this writing, I can proudly say that I have just completed the 25 years of my apprenticeship in leadership. What's next? What is the person who has led this one product company, basically, right? I mean,
one brand.
Yeah, one brand. You've grown it.
Lots of products.
You're the last person who will brag about the numbers when you took over to the numbers today, and I won't even go there because I don't want to embarrass you, but it's huge. You've written books on leadership. You have this USA Today best-selling book, Any Dumbass Can Do It, out now. You're consulting with at least 7 CEOs, probably thousands of CEOs. You don't realize you're consulting. I'm one of them. It's 7 under contract that you're consulting. You have rubbed shoulders with Marshall Goldsmith and Ken Blanchard and Simon Sinek and Brene Brown and all these other people that we all look to lovingly, that we'd love to know. These are your friends. But you're in your apprenticeship in leadership, as you say. What's next?
I help leaders build cultures of belonging where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happier, more connected world. That's my purpose. And, I think that, I really do get sad when I see people with great potential being demotivated and destroyed because they are having to live in toxic leadership cultures. And, I've seen it firsthand, even with family members, where, the environment that they're working in is not bringing the best of them out. So my role, as I see it now, is to do whatever I can to help leaders understand that business not only has a responsibility, but they have the opportunity to make a positive difference in the world if they can just take on some of this simple dumbassery.
I love that. Gary, I can't thank you enough for your time today. I know we said we'd probably go about 45 minutes, but we've gone a little past that. There's been a lot more comments in the chat. Again, one more time, if you'd like to get a copy of the book, just go to Hart, H-A-R-T, leadership.com, click I'm a Dumbass, send me the book. We'll fire it off to you right away. If you have other questions for Gary, I encourage you again to go to thelearningmoment.net. Subscribe to his weekly emails or his daily emails that come out. It's just a quick little quote, a quick story, a nugget, maybe something from Gary's past, oftentimes something he's pulled from another resource. Many times it's something that you've seen before, but that's the brilliance of inspiration is, you might read something today and it'll go right in one ear and out the other. And then you read it tomorrow and it hits you like a ton of bricks. I know that's happened with me. It's like Bible verses. I can read something one time and it doesn't mean anything. I read it tomorrow and it changes my life. I want to thank all of you who took the time. We've in and out of around 30 people on the webinar now. We're going to share this out. Some of you asked, will there be a recording? And yes, there will be. We record all of these and we will be sending them out. Future guests I have coming up over the next couple of months, Henry Walker, the current CEO of Farmers and Merchants Bank, family owned since 1907. Howard Behar, I think you know Howard. Gary, I know Howard and I have talked about you a lot. Howard's the former CEO, president of Starbucks. Loretta Sophie, the former chief operating officer of Nordstrom. These are some of the guests that we have coming up in the Hart Leadership Group Leadership Series. So Gary, as we wrap up today, as I like to give my guests, whether it's on a webinar or a podcast, I apologize if I missed any questions, but rather than taking the time to put my specs on and read again, we'll fire those off to Gary post-webinar. But just any finishing words, any questions you wish I would have asked or things that have popped into your mind as we've been talking today that you'd like to use as your parting words of wisdom from one dumbass to the rest of us dumbasses?
Life is a gift. Don't send it back unwrapped.
Open it up, play with it, use it for what it was intended.
Get that unwrapping happen.
Yeah, excellent. Well, again, Gary, thank you so much. It's truly an honor for me to call you a friend. Known you for a dozen years, have broken bread with you, plan to again soon. Our good friend Ken wasn't able to join us today, but I know he's with us in spirit. For those that are the praying type, we ask a prayer for Ken Blanchard. He'll be 86 coming up in a couple of weeks. And you can imagine at 86, he's not out running marathons today, but we certainly like to pray for his health. And for all of you, again, thank you for joining us today. Gary, it's been a pleasure of mine to host you today and to have this conversation. And again, to the rest of you, we will send this recording out here in the next few days. We encourage you to share it with your organizations, your people, your team, your family, your tribe. And that's all I have for you today. So again, from the heart, this is Ed Hart saying thank you for your time and go have a blessed day and go unwrap that gift that you've been given and put it to use. Thank you, Gary. You're the best.
Thank you.